Now, I've come to the realization after reflecting on the year that we've had in 2020 that having that emergency fund, that pot of money for a rainy day, is the foundations of being financially stable. What's going on, people? Welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all doing good. My name is Jamie, and on this channel we talk about property, investing and personal finance. Now today I want to talk to you about an emergency fund. So we're going to be discussing exactly what an emergency fund is, how much you need in that fund, and why we all need one. And after the year that we've had in 2020, I am such a massive advocate of having an emergency fund to give you that financial stability. And before we start, if you're enjoying these videos, make sure you give me a like, and if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe to my channel to stay up to date with all the latest content. As always, your support is very much appreciated. So, what is an emergency fund? An emergency fund is a pot of savings just in case any unexpected expenses occur out of nowhere. And one thing that I've learned, that life has a funny way of dropping these expenses on you out of nowhere. For example, this happened to me a few years ago with my car, which I've since sold. There was an issue with the engine and it cost me £600 to fix. And I've managed to fix it, put in the expense on my credit card, occurring high interest. And a week later, the clutch went. So I had to go to the garage again and fork out another couple of £100. So it was a really difficult month. But those unexpected expenses might not just be limited to your car. It might be an unexpected expense in your home. For example, the boiler might break, and we all know boilers are expensive. But you also might find quite a bit of difficulty if you are made redundant or put on furlough. And after the year that we've had in 2020, no one is safe. It could happen to anybody. Between August and October of last year, 1.7 million people, which is equivalent to 4.9% of the UK workforce, were classed as unemployed due to the pandemic, and that number is set to rise in 2021. And if you also consider, according to Your Money, a third of adults living in the UK have less than £600 worth of savings. So if any of these unexpected expenses occur in your life, or if you are placed on furlough, your income's reduced, or you've been made redundant, you need to be in a position to cover your expenses for the next couple of months to get back on your feet. And having that emergency fund is an insurance policy to help you be able to do that. Now, I've come to the realization after reflecting on the year that we've had in 2020 that having that emergency fund, that pot of money for a rainy day, is the foundations of being financially stable. And now has never been a more important time to have and start building that emergency fund, because you never need that emergency fund until you actually need it. So how do you build an emergency fund? Firstly, you need to make sure that you've paid off any high interest consumer debt. So we're talking credit cards, we're talking mortgage arrears, overdrafts, payday loans, all these different types of debts which are occurring high interest. You need to make sure you've paid off. Over time, that debt is occurring interest, which is compounding. So you're paying off more and more money over time. You need to get that interest under control, bring it right down before you even start to think about starting an emergency fund. Secondly, you need to start with the end in mind. It's a quote from a book which I'm reading at the minute called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Really good book. I highly recommend you reading it if you haven't already done so. But that basically means you need to kind of visualize what the end goal is for you. So in terms of the emergency fund, what is the target amount of money? Now, traditionally, a lot of people recommend having 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in your emergency fund. So you need to work out what your expenses are. If you haven't already done so, hopefully you've got a budget plan so you know exactly what your monthly expenses are, and times that amount by a minimum of 3 months hopefully 6 months if you want to be really, really strict with this. And that will give you the amount in which you need to save in your emergency fund. Next, you need to pay yourself first, which basically means you need to automate your money. So when you get paid, you're paying yourself first. So you set up a direct debit into a separate account to build that emergency fund. Now, I like to think of this as a personal tax. Now, the government love to tax your money before you receive it. You need to be very strict with your money and tax yourself to give you that financial stability in an emergency fund. Now, if money is tight, you need to think creatively. Instead of saying, oh, I can't afford to save right now, you need to think, how can I afford to save right now? And like I say, thinking creatively, you can think of ways to cut your costs. You can also think of ways to increase your income to make sure that you're putting away that money for a rainy day. Ask yourself each month, do you really need that extra ASOS order? Or do you really need multiple subscriptions to Netflix, Sky TV, Amazon Prime? I don't even watch TV that much anymore. So you can easily reduce your expenditure each month to start putting away that small amount of money to build that emergency pot. Start small and get into good habits. As long as you're saving a little amount each month, you're making progress. And over time, that a little amount of money which you're putting away will grow into a bigger and bigger pot. And trust me, there's nothing better than seeing your money grow and grow over time. And once you're comfortable with those small amounts, let's increase that amount. Let's start building it a little bit quicker over time. I think there's nothing worse than committing yourself to putting away a large amount of money and then 2 weeks down the line, you're taking that money out. You need to put that away, lock it away. So the best way is to start small, get into those good habits, and make small steps to put in away that money for an emergency fund. And lastly, if you do tap into that emergency fund, make sure you have a plan to top that back up. It's important that that emergency fund does not shrink over time. And it's also important to review that emergency fund if your expenses increase, for example. You may need a new target in your emergency pot to cover your living expenses if your circumstances change. Now, I hope you find that useful and has kind of motivated you or kind of made you realize the importance of emergency fund. Because as I said, after the year that we've had in 2020, anything can happen. Those unexpected expenses can land on you out of nowhere. Life has a funny way of dropping that kind of stuff on you. So make sure you're prepared for those situations by having that emergency fund. And that's something that I'm going to add on to my goals for 2021, to automate my money, to build that pot of emergency fund just in case anything happens. And that emergency fund is separate to my property fund and my savings for the future. That needs to be a separate pot of money for just in case anything happens, that I need to tap into that amount to cover my living expenses. So let me know your thoughts on this video. Maybe 3 to 6 months is a little bit too much. Maybe you have different opinions. Let's start that conversation in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you about your opinion around emergency funds. What's your target? How do you achieve that emergency fund over time? Because it can be a difficult thing to save up, especially when you've got other goals, as I mentioned, me saving for a property, for example. You need to prioritize what is most important. But at the end of the day, if something does happen unexpectedly, you need to be in a position to cover those costs. But thank you for listening. Please like this video if you enjoy it, obviously. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on all the latest content. But as I mentioned, thank you, much appreciated. Hope you're all staying well, keeping safe, and I'll see you again next time.